This is not exactly a user story, but it's a requirement whenever we have Experience Cloud. And that is sometimes we need to automatically create users, external users, to have access to our system. And to create an external user, an Experience Cloud user, we need to have a contact first. You need to have a contact, and from that contact, we create an Experience Cloud user. And there is a link between the two. On the user record, there is a field called Contact ID that represents the relationship, the link between the user and the contact. So the requirement is that whenever we have a new contact created or updated where the title equals participant, we need to create a user for that contact, and we need to give them the permission set arc access. I'm just like taking an example permission set. You can use any other permission set for that case. Let's look at a few things. So we're gonna create, if we were to create a new contact, we have the first name, last name, email, and we need to also populate the title field. You might have some other criteria that's more meaningful than the title field. I'm just going with something simple for now. Then we need to go ahead and create a user. And the reason I'm doing all of this is to talk about asynchronous path and the error mixed DML that you will definitely come across at some point. Okay, let's go ahead and build that. So whenever a new contact gets created, we need to create the user and then assign the permission set. So triggers, new contact. Whenever a contact gets created where the title equals participant, then when it gets updated to be participant, then we need to create the user. And I'm gonna do this in a subflow. I'm gonna use the assignment of the user in a subflow, and then let's go to flows, and let's create a new flow. You don't have to. You could do that in the main flow. I feel like we may elsewhere need to assign a user, so I'm gonna do that in a subflow instead. So subflow, and what we're going to do is that we're going to send the contact values, the contact with its field values from the parent to the subflow. So we need the subflow to receive the contact into some variable. So we're going to create the contact variable in the subflow, record variable underscore contact, and this is a contact object, and it's available for input because we're going to receive that from the parent. Now that we have the contact, we can go ahead and create the user. And if we were to do this, like go with create and then manually select the object, we're creating a user like this, and then I click outside it, it might take a few seconds, but with a recent release, the flows automatically detect the required fields on any object. After you do that, it's going to list the fields that are required so that you can populate them, which is a nice thing to have for almost every other object except the user, because if you see, a ton of these fields are actually automatically populated, and we don't have to populate them in the flow. I have collected the ones that we actually need to populate ourselves in here. So this is the list. So I'm not going to go with the create manual like this. I will use a record variable instead. So we only populate the ones that we need. And we could create the user, like we could use a create element in the subflow right away, but I would rather just perform the assignment in a subflow and send the user record variable to the parent and then perform the create on the parent. Why? In case we repeat this step multiple times on a parent flow where we assign one user and then we assign a second user and then we assign a third user, we can then use only one DML, one create, to create all three of them after adding them to one collection, and instead of using the create again and again and again, to reduce the number of DML statements that we're using in one transaction. So let's create a user variable, record variable user, and let's select the user object here, and that's gonna go out of the subflow into the parent flow, so it's available for output. Now let's go ahead and assign the values of the user object, and I'm gonna use three assignments: assign user information, and then assign user profile, and then assign user keys. You can use only one assignment. I like to separate things like this. I think we are more organized, and it's easier to find things when you open this flow, again, for troubleshooting or when some other admin looks at this. Let's assign user information, and user first name, that's the contact first name, and then user last name, that's the contact last name, and then user alias. Let's construct the alias. Let's pick up the first character from the first name and then the first 3 characters from the last name. To do that, we're going to use a formula, new resource, and then formula. I'll name it like this, and that's alias, and that returns text. And to grab the first number of characters from any value, we'll use the function left. And then where are we extracting these this text from? From the contact first name. I need the first character, and then I will concatenate with a plus sign, and then I'll repeat this for last name. I need the first 3 characters from the contact last name. I need the first 3 characters concatenated like this. And if you want to like uppercase the first letter, so we can use this and then get all of that. So this is the first letter, and then we can just uppercase it like this. All right, so we've got the alias. Now let's do the email. Record variable user email, that's email equals contact email. For the username, username equals, now we don't want to make the username the same as the email, because the usernames must be unique across Salesforce orgs. So it's typically that I add a prefix at the beginning of the email so that it constructs the username. So let's create a formula to do that as well. So this is formula, this is text, username, and that returns a text. And I typically start with the name of the organization. In this case, I'll just use the name of my company, and then so Swift underscore, and then I'll concatenate the email. So contact email. Okay. So this is the username. Now we need the contact ID. This is the link between the user and the contact. So user contact. This is a field that you don't populate for internal users. You only do that when you create external users. And that contact ID is basically the contact ID here. Now that, let me save. Subflow assign user. I'm using assign because I'm not creating the user. Instead, I would have named this create user. So this is assign user. Now let's go and assign the profile. And a good practice here is that you don't assign the profile ID. You don't want to like make say like assign profile like this, assign profile, and then record variable user profile ID. You don't want to go grab the ID and just like hard code it like this, because the problem here is if you create a sandbox, the ID of the profile is going to be different. If the customer is migrating this Salesforce instance for whatever reason to a new org, moving to a new org, then the profile ID is going to be different as well. What's going to be the same, most likely, unless someone intentionally changes it, is the name of the profile. To do that, you need to query the profile before you actually do that. And this is basically dynamically assigning the profile ID. So we're going to query the profile first, get profile. And the profile that we can search for the profile object. Profile is an object. And then we need the profile. And which profile are we getting? We're gonna get a profile called, let me show you that here, profiles. We're gonna get a profile called, I just named it, I created earlier, Swift Customer Community Plus User. Let me pause for a second here. We have like 3 different types of licenses. We have Customer Community. For Experience Cloud, we have Customer Community, we have Customer Community Plus, and we have Partner Community. And for each one of those types, we have subtypes, 2 subtypes for each one. For customer community, there is customer community user, and then there is customer community login user. So for each one of those, there is user and login user, two types. And this just determines how the pricing works, but it doesn't affect the functionality. So we can just ignore all the subtypes. And all of these profiles, these 6 profiles are out of the box. And typically, we don't want to edit the standard profiles. It's generally a good practice to clone this and just make edits to the clone instead of the out-of-the-box profile. In case things go south, you can always refer back to the original profile. And even if you actually attempt to assign the standard profile to a user, Salesforce is going to warn you that you can't do that, and you need to enable a certain setting to allow you to do that. So what I did is that I went to customer community plus user, and then I cloned it to a new profile, just a clone, and I just named it Swift customer community plus user. So I'm just going to use this profile here. Let's go back to get profile with that's the name. I'm just making sure that there is no spaces at the beginning. And then all the information that we need from there is the ID. That way we are dynamically grabbing the profile. Now let's go in here and assign the ID from this profile ID into this user profile ID. Now that we have assigned the profile, let's go ahead and assign the remaining fields. I named all of these keys because all of them have the keyword keys. Assign user keys. We're gonna go with email encoding first, and that is Unicode UTF-8. Not that I know what that means, but this is the default value. And then the user language, let's go with English, and then the locale, let's go with English as well. I can probably copy the same thing, English United States here, and then the time zone, let's go with new_York. Okay, let's save, and this is all we need for assigning the user in a subflow. Now let's go back to the main flow here. Let me save it so that I can refresh the page. This is auto create user and assign permission set. Let's save this and let's refresh so that we can call that subflow. Let's call that subflow here and let's assign user. Got the user here, and let's send the contact down, and that contact is the triggering contact. And I'm clicking outside so that I send the entire contact, not select a field from in there. And then this should return the output is the record variable user. I don't want to manually assign this. I'll actually access it using outputs. I'll show you that in a second. Okay, we've got the user. Let's go ahead and create that user. Create user. And that's the output from assign user. So the user gets created now. And now this is something that changes with every Salesforce release, but the mixed DML error happens whenever you try to perform a DML on a setup and on a non-setup and some setup objects in the same transaction. So if you were to create a contact and then automatically create a user in the same transaction, this is going to work. Now that didn't work before. We had to separate these into different transactions. Something that wouldn't work now is if you try to create a user contact and then create a user and then assign a permission set to that user, all of these in the same transaction. The assign permission set pod needs to be separated. Otherwise, we're going to get the mixed DML error. I'm going to show you that now. So if we were to go with this is going to work. I only added the part where we assign a permission set to show you the mixed DML error. Now that we are creating a user, let's assign a permission set. And a permission set is an object, and a permission set assignment is a different object. Permission set assignment is a junction object between permission set and user. So it basically has a relationship with both objects. And the way you would assign a permission set is you basically create a permission set assignment record. So first, I'm going to need to get the permission set. So let's get permission set, because we don't want, when we create the permission set assignment, I'll show you in a second, we don't want to hard code the permission set ID. We need it to be dynamic, similar to how we got the profile. So we need to get a permission set where name is there a label. There is a label. Let's go with name, and I'm gonna assume that name here means the developer name. Now let's go grab it from here, permission set, arc access, and then where is the, so it's arc access. It doesn't show me the name in here. Okay, let's go with I could, a trick that we could potentially use is to in Salesforce Inspector, I could export permission sets. Let's do that. Permission set, and I could just access the name and then the label like this, and I can read it here. This is the arc access. Or I could try where name equals arc access. Let's search for that. I don't find it. Then let's use label instead. So this is arc access, and then you see the developer name here now. It's Industries arc access, Industries arc PSI. I'll copy the name. I typically want to go with the API name, not with labels. So let's grab this permission set and the only thing we need is the ID. Now let's create the permission set assignment. Create permission set assignment, and let's select manual, and we'll select the object permission set assignment, and the assignee ID is the output from assign user record. You remember when the user gets created, the ID gets assigned into this record variable user ID, and then permission set ID is the one that we got earlier. Permission set ID. I'll just type down ID, and then it should be the very last thing here. So these are the only two fields. These are the two relationships. That's how junction objects work. There is two relationships with two parents. So that's how we create the permission set assignment, and that's everything we need now. Let's save this, and let's activate, and let's try. Now let's try to create something. I'll clone this contact. Let's do 6 here, and then remember to populate the title with participants, so that actually works. Let's save this. And this is the error now. It says mixed DML operation, and this is basically happening because we are performing an update on we're creating a contact and creating a user and creating a permission set assignment in the same transaction. The contact is a non-setup object, the user is a setup object, the permission set assignment is a setup object. User and contact in one transaction is fine. contact with a permission set assignment in the same transaction is not fine. So now the question, like, how do we separate this into a separate transaction? You basically go into the start element and then you add include a run asynchronously path, which is going to separate these transactions. So this is the second path. And then here we're going to move this create permission set assignment. Let's move both of them. Let's move this first, cut and then paste it here, and then let's move the get as well. The get is a query. It's not a DML, so it doesn't matter if it is in the same transaction or a separate transaction. But then something here that we're gonna need to do is to, because this is a separate transaction and it's run asynchronously, we don't actually have access to the values from this. So in the create permission set assignment here, we need the user ID, and the user ID is available from this record variable user. That record variable user is not available in the run asynchronously path. So we need to find a way to get it. The way I'm going to do that, there is multiple ways to do that, but the way I'm going to do that is at the contact level, I created an object called, I created a field called user. And that user is a lookup to the user. So basically I'm creating there's like now two relationships back and forth. From the contact you can go to user, and from the user you can go to the contact. And here I'm going to populate that user field. So I'm going to update the triggering record. Let's update contact. And the field that we're going to update is the user. And then we're going to populate the value from the output user, record variable user, and ID. User ID. There. Now we do have access to this at the contact level. Remember here, after run immediately, the transaction has completed and the contact record has been updated. Now we can access the triggering contact. So here, instead of using this, I will use the triggering contact and then user ID from here. Let's try this. Let's save as a new version and let's activate. The way run asynchronously works is that immediately after this transaction completes, if the resources are available, which typically they are, then this is going to run immediately. It might sound like they are running just like synchronously, but they are not, just going to run immediately after. Let's now test again. Let's go just all right, so let's clone this and let's just use 6 again. And let's save. Now it does save successfully. Let's go to I'll go back to the list view so I can see this. This is number 6. Now the user field has been populated with the user. It means that the user got created successfully. Let's actually navigate to that user. And let's look at user detail. We need to make, so the user got created successfully. The only thing we need to make sure now is that the permission set got assigned to that user, and we see that the permission set got assigned successfully.